At Paragon One, we partner with corporate America to create new and more accessible pathways for young people to get into their dream careers. And we do this with remote externship programs. And as some examples of that, I want to highlight some of our upcoming programs right now. We have 6-week programs with Snapchat, Facebook, PwC, Pfizer. These are all names you know, right? To create these amazing opportunities for you to get skills and experiences that are going to be helpful for you in any profession you want to pursue in the future. We'll drop links to those later on in our webinar. But to talk more about our Bridges webinar today, I want to remind you to make sure you get yourself settled somewhere with good lighting, little to no noise. Turn that camera on because we want to see you. There's going to be a chance for you to speak up later in our webinar. Be sure to take notes, and also we want to hear from you. So feel free to engage in the chat as well. All right, now that you're all settled and ready to focus on our Bridges webinar, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Alvin Patrick, who is the executive producer and head of race and culture at CBS News. Alvin is an award-winning journalist and executive producer, as I mentioned, for CBS's News's Race and Culture unit. He has more than 3 decades of experience in the broadcast and cable television business and has produced reports for 60 Minutes, CBS Evening News, Face the Nation, and 48 Hours. Previously, Patrick worked with ABC News, The Daily, ESPN News, MTV Networks, and HBO. Alvin, what haven't you done? No, in all seriousness, hello, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks so much, Cody. I really appreciate it. And hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of Paragon One's summer webinar series, Bridges. As Cody said, I'm Alvin Patrick, and it is my pleasure today to serve as the moderator for what I think will be a very informative discussion that will help you all make the human connections that you need to advance in your young careers. We have 2 wonderful executives on the panel today. The first is Leah McGowen-Hare. And Leah is the Vice President of Trailblazer Community and Trailhead Evangelism at Salesforce, where she works to make learning accessible and empower everyone to have a career in tech. She's a master technical trainer with over.
Okay. So out of curiosity,
One second here, I apologize, Alvin. I'm going to jump in. We're having a little technical difficulty. So before we continue, I just want to invite everyone again, please, if you're joining on a mobile device on your laptop, please remember to mute out of respect for our incredible moderator and amazing panelists here today. So thank you for that. And Alvin, we just got caught off there a little bit with Leah leading the different Trailblazer groups at Salesforce. Please continue.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm good?
Sir.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah, so Leah McGowen-Hare is the Vice President of Trailblazer Community and Trailhead Evangelism at Salesforce, where she works to make learning accessible and empower everyone to have a career in tech. She's a master technical trainer with over 20 years of experience. She is a key brain behind the Be a Multiplier program that inspires people to amplify and encourage their communities to skill up for the jobs of today and tomorrow using Tailhead, which is Salesforce's free online learning system. She uses her experience to make technology more accessible to youth, girls, communities of color, and veterans through organizations such as Black Girls Code, Hidden Genius Project, Girls Who Code, and Trailhead Military. Leah has also published a children's book, Charlie the Hot Dog, which I'm extremely interested in finding out more about, which we probably won't get to today, but and she enjoys working out and traveling with her family. So welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much, Alvin. Really appreciate the interest.
Thanks. And our second panelist, Cindy Owyoung, is the Vice President of Inclusion, Equity, and Belonging at Robinhood, where she partners with business leaders employee resource groups, and the people experience team to support the firm's mission to democratize finance for all. She's also the founder of Breaking Glass Forums, which develops strategies to accelerate diverse leadership in organizations. She's led DEI initiatives for over 15 years at organizations like GitHub, Yahoo, and Intuit. And she serves on the board of directors of Abilities United, a nonprofit serving people with developmental disabilities. She earned an MBA in organizational behavior from UCLA, and she has 2 bachelor's degrees from UC Berkeley. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Alvin. Happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks. So you know what, let's just jump right in. Let's get started. Leah, you can go first. You know, oftentimes it's the personal story that can be most effective when we talk about business. So tell me about your background and your career story. You can throw some personal, stories in there, like how you wrote, a little children's book. But also just how networking is in your career was important, and the lessons that you've learned.
Absolutely. I just want to echo saying thank you and just express gratitude for everyone being here, taking time out of their day to be a part of this conversation. I started off, my undergrad was a computer science degree. I actually started off as a dance major. That's a whole nother story. And my father was a professor, so got me to change my major in a very couched in the whole spirit of love. And the bottom line was, I really only saw myself as a dancer, and he knew I was really good with science. And he was like, I know that the rest of the world may see you fitting the box of a dancer, but don't put yourself in a box just because the rest of the world does. You have many gifts, many talents. So please explore all of them, and which I did, and it led me to a comp sci degree. So I started off my career, really heavily in tech. And during a time when tech was not a thing, there was like, when I explained to people what I did, I explained it within the example of, what an ATM machine is? Well, there's code behind that makes it do what it does. I build stuff like that. They're like, so can you hack an ATM machine? I'm like, that's not the point. I started off in tech when there was no industry of technology. It was tech that supported the financial industry or supported the government industry or supported, manufacturing industry. So I started off at a company called Anderson Consulting, and I then moved on from consulting and I became a software engineer for a company called PeopleSoft. And I did that for many moons. And then I decided that I really there was something missing, and I missed the interaction with people, because as a software engineer, I literally was coding all day and did not have to interact with people. So my manager at the time said, there's a great role opening up for a technical trainer. And I was like, trainer, I don't know about that. Because I came from a family of educators. My father was a professor. My mother was a teacher. Duh, I should have known I was going to be an educator, a teacher. So long story short, I became a technical trainer, and it was one of the best decisions I, ever did. It was a step in faith. And I traveled the world training developers around the world how to build systems using, at that time, PeopleSoft's proprietary language called People Code. And teaching things like object-oriented programming to people who had never coded before. And it was absolutely an amazing journey. Not only was I able to deliver information and teach people, I learned so much about myself. And after that, I then left and I went to grad school. I got my master's in education and technology. And then I went on and started working for Salesforce back in training. I had my own company for a brief moment while I was in grad school. Then I worked for Salesforce as a technical trainer. And I tell you what, I really, really thought that was what I was supposed to do. I found my life purpose. Yay. But life changes. And I had amazing mentors who had made me see myself in a way I had not considered, in a much stronger, bigger, impactful role as an executive. So I started that journey, and I started thinking more strategically and how to help educate at a larger scale. And so that kind of pushed me through. And each of these different steps in my career could have only gone that way if I did one, stepped out on faith and not fear, knowing that, okay, I don't know what this looks like, but I trust my gut. I know I'm smart and I trust the people around me. They would not lead me in a way that would not serve me best. And two, having a vision for myself, because believe me, if you don't have a vision for yourself, somebody else got one for you. So have a vision for yourself. And my vision always was to learn and experience new things that leverage the skill sets that I already had and bring them to the next level. And I had amazing mentors and advocates and sponsors in my life. And I only got that through, as Alvin put it, human connection. Human connection, so very key. And we'll talk more about that because I think there's a lot of limitations we have in our own mind about making those connections. And I want to share with you some lessons I learned to making those human connections so you don't make the same mistakes that I did.
Thanks so much, Leah. Wow, there are a lot of great nuggets in there. Faith, not fair. I love it. Thanks so much. So Cindy, tell us about your career journey, your life journey, any personal stories. How did you get to where you are today? And just, give us sort of a roadmap as to how you made it happen for yourself.
Yeah, hard to follow Leah's story, gotta say. I can feel the educator in you coming out in your storytelling, and it's so wonderful. So I actually have a little bit more of a zigzag path in my career. I started out in advertising. When I was in undergrad, my majors were marketing, finance, and psychology. And I really wanted to I was really into understanding people and what motivates them and why do they, do the things that they do. And that's actually been a thread throughout my career, despite the zigzags. But I chose to apply that first in a marketing career. And so I went into advertising agencies, doing consumer research and strategic branding for different campaigns, where I got to, really represent the voice of consumers at the table in developing our advertising strategies and our creative channels and what media outlets we ended up being in. And I did that for almost 10 years. And it was really a very fast-paced, very intense kind of industry. And I was, I recognized after those 10 years that I wanted to do something different. I wasn't feeling personally fulfilled in that career, despite all of the wonderful work accomplishments I had done. And so I kind of stepped back and really took stock of what I wanted to do, and looked at what I felt was really the things that really gave me personal satisfaction. And it was a lot of pro bono work that I had done, volunteering for different nonprofits and developing campaigns for them. So I decided to go back to school. I went to grad school to get an MBA with an emphasis in nonprofit management. But as things tend to happen, life threw me a little bit of a change in that I happened to also take a diversity management course when I was taking my MBA, and a guest speaker, a diversity manager from Toyota, came into that room and talked about what she did. And I thought, oh my gosh, you get paid to help people create access to opportunity and advance and get them promoted into positions of leadership and decision making. I'm like, how do I do that? That seems like the best of both worlds to me. And so that's when I decided to shift, because I recognize that the world of nonprofit management will always be there for me. And it's still on my life plan. It's just going to be a little bit later. So I went into diversity management, and this was probably one of the best decisions that I've made in my career, because it's been exactly what I had hoped it would be, right? Very personally fulfilling. I'm focused on inclusion, access, belonging, equity. I've had the opportunity to do that at many tech companies, both at the startup space, as well as really established global companies. And it's been over 15 years in that space now, where it's led me to, Robinhood, where I'm at now, where I get to be at a company that lives and breathes inclusion, right? In its purpose, in its mission, democratizing finance for all. It's one of the reasons it came into being, right, as a company. And when you recognize that really social justice is so much tied into economic justice, you can't have one without the other, in my view. I have an opportunity here. This company has an opportunity to really drive equity and help people reach their future financial goals in a meaningful way that I don't think any other company has really done. So that's what I'm here to do. That's what, how I came into this career path. And I would also just add that, in terms of networking and human connection, as you and both and Leah mentioned, right? Like, and it's so important. Like, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had the career path that I've had without that. Every step along the way, I've had mentors. I've had coaching from people in my peer group. I've had people who have really helped and sponsored me when I was looking for that new career, switching from marketing to diversity management in particular, right? It was because I did as much networking as possible, as because I met people and tried to help them and offer services to them, right, in some way, shape, or form, that they helped me in return, right, along the way. And so that's something I think about a lot. And I think that, people really do have to invest in relationships in order to support your own community, and your community supports you and how you get ahead in your career.
Thanks so much, Cindy. And you started touching there at the end on my next question, which was not going to be about networking, because I don't like to use that word. It's going to be about connecting and making those important human connections, relationships that so many careers are forged with. So, let's talk about, because I have this theory, which is that I think that a lot of people think that networking just means you meet somebody and then they do something for you, and then maybe you do something for them and it's kind of over. But it's kind of a two-way street, and it's about two people sort of really understanding each other. So how do you, Cindy first and then Leah, how do you suggest students go about building those connections?
Yeah, I think it starts with like really doing your research, right? Like, I think it's really important to understand whatever career choice that you're making, or whatever industry or companies that you're wanting to work for in the future, to really understand what is the landscape, who are the people, who are the influencers, reach out to people, do informational interviews, so that you can better understand how that industry or company works, and gain more wisdom from the experiences of as many people as possible. I think that if you're in a process of learning and curiosity, that it's much easier to make that connection with people. People naturally want to help people who want to learn and grow in their spaces. I always, for me, it's always a point to, as part of my philosophy, to like pay it forward, right? People help me, so I want to help other people in return. And oftentimes it just takes that reach out to do it. And so many people can be afraid of just like taking that first step and reaching out. But you know, if you're sincere in how you approach people and you take the time to you know, really learn something about the company or space that you're trying to get in, and show that and demonstrate that in some way, people are much more likely to feel connected to you, right? And be open to the conversation that you want to have.
Leah.
Yes, everything Cindy said, yes, and I would I want to give an additional approach. Making human connections with other really starts with you, and starts with you kind of doing your own sort of self-check. When I came into corporate America, I was the first in my family and first generation to be in corporate America. My family were academia, but not corporate America. Very different landscape. But I went in sort of on this, you know, I was the only one in the room. So I was automatically on defense. Like I'm the only one in the room. Note to self, you can't make connections when you walk in defensive, just FYI. It doesn't work, right?
When you
So
say
it's
the room, you mean you were the only Black woman?
I was the only Black, I was the only female, right? Because once again, technology industry back in the 90s, like, you know, before you all, probably most of y'all were even a thought. But walking in the rooms, there was no one that looked like me. And I was already on defense. Like, say something, just say something. I'm ready, right? And that's not welcoming. That's not going to draw people to you. So I had to learn to make a human connection, a real human connection transcends race, gender, sexual orientation. A connection is a connection. It can be, oh, we both like this show, or oh, we both like working out, or oh, we both like, but you have to create the space to make that connection. And if you're going in with your own biases on, you know, they probably think this of me, or you know, oh, they're not like me, so I'm not going to be able to connect with them, there will be no human connection. So it's really starting with yourself and taking inventory of how open am I to receiving? How open am I to connecting to other people? And I like to go in and just start asking questions about people. Let me tell you something, folks love to talk about themselves. Go in, and especially as older folks, we like to tell y'all everything. Well, let me tell you how it was. So just go in with that, just like Cindy said, that sense of curiosity, that sense of learning. So I used to play a game with myself. I would go in and I'd be like, all right, on the surface, no one really kind of looks like me, but I bet you there's someone in here I have more of a connection with than they even know. So I would go and start asking questions and this and that. So then it would be like, oh, you went to boarding school? So did I. And they'd be like, what? Shut up. Yep, I did too. So just finding ways that you connect with people that transcends their own expectations. I think that's huge. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's how I help make human connection and navigating that space, is really checking my own biases and being like, hey, they may not be of my color, but they can be of my kind. They can be of your color, but not of your kind. So you need to be open to receiving people from all walks of life.
Absolutely. It's so important. And, you know, it's interesting because as a journalist, I'm sort of trained to sort of make that connection very quickly, you know, with people. So it's sort of second nature to me, but it's interesting when I meet so many people where it's not really second nature to them. So that was some great advice.
Well, I mean, Alvin, because you navigate to what's comfortable, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
isn't there a book like Why Do All the Black Kids Sit at the Same Lunch Table?
Yeah.
Right?
No,
You
absolutely.
navigate to what's comfortable, and that's fine too. But that can't be the only, right? You've got to open it up to other experiences.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to like plus 100 to everything that Leah says. And, you know, just I'm an introvert, not an extrovert. And so it's really hard for me to actually want to put myself out there and like meet other people who I don't know, right? Like it's such an uncomfortable place for many of us, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And so I would like literally challenge myself to do that, right? Like be at this go to this networking, you know, or cocktail hour, whatever, right? And meet two people right? Just, create a challenge for yourself and make sure that you follow through on that. And again, look for ways in which you can, I think, as Leah put it so well, like open yourself up to possibility in this space.
Absolutely. All great stuff. I knew this was going to be fun. All right. So why don't we move on to specifically your companies? I mean, look, you guys work at two of the great companies in this country, Salesforce and Robinhood. For a student who's really interested in working for your company, tell me about some of the various programs that are running, from internships, externships, co-ops, work shadowing. Tell me what's going on at Salesforce and at Robinhood that can really motivate a student to want to come work for your place. Leah, you can go first, and then Cindy, please follow.
Yeah, I think for Salesforce, one, I would challenge you to open your mind as a bigger picture, not just for the Salesforce company, but Salesforce ecosystem. We have so many customers that utilize our software, so many partners, so many ISV, independent software vendors who build on our platform. These are also possibilities of potential employers, right? So I would say, if you're interested in working with our product, it is not Salesforce, but it would be our customers. Now, whether it's anybody in the ecosystem or Salesforce itself, I would always encourage people, take advantage of all the resources out there to learn and understand our company. For example, go get a pencil or whatever, the iPad, however y'all take notes these days. Trailhead.com. It is our free online learning platform. You can learn everything about our products. You can learn about Salesforce there. And if you come into an interview saying, oh yeah, I'm already a ranger, that's like one of the highest levels of learning. It's a gamified system. That puts you above others, and it's something you can put on your LinkedIn. So we give available many free resources to learn about our software, our company. So do your research. And also for students, we do have a program for internships called Future Force. But like I said, once again, if you do the Trailhead and you become Ranger, that is going to be a nice, little feather in your cap when you're doing those interviews, whether it's for an internship or a full-time job, to be like, I'm a Ranger. So I would definitely take advantage of all of the information that is out there and learn as much as possible. Oh, somebody's so excited. They're already on Trailhead. I hear you.
Awesome. And I'll vouch for everything that Leah just said. Like I've been in places where I've actually developed programs for our internal employees to get Trailhead certifications, especially Trailhead military, right? So for veterans who are, just transitioning into the civilian workforce and looking for ways to do that, right? Getting that certification has just been amazing to watch people develop their careers in that way. So thank you to Salesforce for providing that curriculum to anybody, really, to take advantage of and learn. I would say here at Robinhood, we have internship programs for students, and they run year round, actually. So we have 3 cohorts every year: winter, summer, and fall. And they include not just, projects that you can put onto your resume and the experience of being at a hyper growth, really rocket ship kind of a company, but we give people exposure to our leadership. We have social events and ways that we're very intentional about building your networks inside Robinhood and with each other as a community, so that you can all support each other through your internships. And we also give mentors as well. So we try to create a really strong support system for interns to succeed and hopefully eventually come back, right, into full-time roles at Robinhood. There are different programs that we also have to help you all prep for those types of internships, whether that is through interview prep, resume prep, general information sessions about what Robinhood does and is, and talking to recruiters during office hours. So there's a lot of things to actually take advantage of in helping you prepare for some potential role at Robinhood if that's what you want to take advantage of.
That's great. So you make it easy for students to be proactive about learning about Robinhood as well as Salesforce, which I think is really good, because so many times young people, even though they're so good at using the internet, sometimes they just don't seem to be able to get the information that they want. And I'm glad that you guys are making that very, very accessible. So Cindy and then Leah, tell me, you guys are both senior leaders, you're executives, you're used to assessing people. When you're looking at young people, entry level for internships, externships, entry level jobs, what are you looking for when a young person applies? I was going to say walks through the door, but no one's walking through doors anymore. We're just zooming. We're zooming through doors. But what do you look for in that young person as a senior leader?
Yeah, I would say three kind of key things that transcend any role or function that people are trying to get into. One is that they care about our mission, that there's some sort of passion there for what we do as a company, right? Two is a desire to learn. I think we talked about learning, growth, curiosity. I think it's especially important for a company like Robinhood because things are always changing, right? We are in a really dynamic industry. We're a really dynamic company. And if you're not adaptable and willing to learn and grow and change as the situation and environment changes, we're not going to be the best place, right, for you. So that's really important. And then the last area is communication skills. We really look for people who are strong communicators of their ideas, of their perspectives, whether that's written and or verbal, right? We want people to have a voice and to be able to express their opinions in a strong way at the company. So those are the three things that we really feel are important and that we look for across the board.
So before we started this webinar, Cindy and I shared notes, and apparently she took my answer. So thanks, Cindy. No, it's Cindy's right on point. It's, for us, one, understanding our company and knowing what our products are and what we're doing and understanding our values. What are the values of Salesforce? Can you tell me, that shows that you've done some research. And, I don't expect you to be a ranger, but having gone out to Trailhead and they got a few badges and understanding the concept of that is very important. Like, Cindy said, always learning, a beginner's mindset, always willing to come in, ask questions to understand and not making assumptions, right? Understanding that I need to learn, I need to understand. Even if I think I understand, I want to understand at a deeper level. And I would say the third thing is split between two things, between being able to work well with others and strong work ethic. No, so team dynamics are very important. Not being in a silo is very important on our team. Being able to collaborate, being able to show your work and receive feedback and not going off and doing something on your own and then doing the final project and like nobody's input was part of it. That does not work well in our environment. And a strong work ethic. And, Cindy tapped on this a little bit too, that ability to pivot and be agile. I mean, if anything that we've learned through this last year and a half or so is, being agile and being able to pivot is a huge, great aspect to be able to have in your life. So those would be the key things for us as well.
Yeah, and Leah gave number 4 and 5 on my list.
So, before we go to some of the questions, and there are a bunch of them from students, I have one last question because I know that some students tend to get very obsessed with their major and, you know, what their field of study is. And I have I have a theory, which is that, you know, I think it's more important for students to just be curious and want to be learners as opposed to what your major is. But I'd love to hear from you guys, first Leah and then Cindy. How important is your major when it comes to finding a job? Well, generally, and then at Salesforce and at Robinhood.
I mean, I think it really does depend. There are some areas that having done a deep study, a 4-year degree in, is going to help you. Like if I'm looking for a software engineer, somebody who studied computer science is going to, might be a great fit for that. Now, I have met people in my career journey who are working at tech companies, maybe not necessarily in a very technical role, but working at tech companies that have like a history degree. And that's the myth that I want to bust, is that you can work at a tech company and not have a technical degree. One of the degrees that seems to serve so well in our companies in a non-technical role are English and writers, anybody with those skills, because I'm gonna tell you, developers aren't always the best writers of documentation or content. So like those degrees, oftentimes people think, oh, even a history degree, because we know that in a history degree you write a whole lot. So having that writing skill is such a highly marketable skill in our industry. But I would have to say that, getting a job, I mean, it's also the experiences that you get. And if you get additional certifications, maybe I do have a non-technical degree, but I went and got, several certifications in technical areas, maybe in data analytics and, you know, um, data analysis or whatever the case may be. Those ones will serve you well if you're trying to go into sort of a data analytics role. So I think if there's some level of studying in it and experience, the culmination, the whole parts, all the parts together can help sell your story. So it's just a matter. I think there's some level, for some it does and for some it doesn't, but it's really putting all of the experiences together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Leah on that. It definitely depends on kind of what field you're trying to go into. But also having said that, I think what I try to focus people on is competency, right? As opposed to pedigree. And really it's around, if I think about our customer experience internships that are available to people to apply to right now. We don't need or look for people necessarily who have finance backgrounds, right, for those roles, because we actually have a program that is willing to teach. Right. So you can come from any major and apply into that as long as you're willing to learn about financial concepts and be able to study towards the licensing requirements that role might entail a year from now. Really, the common denominator that we want is people who actually really enjoy building relationships with other people, right? We find that those folks are the most successful in those roles, regardless of the type of background that you have. And so, we've also seen, in our technical side, people will switch careers and come into coding from completely non-technical backgrounds. And maybe they've taken a boot camp, or maybe they've like learned it on their own, like self-learned. And we find that like completely amazing if you have the capability and the competency and you demonstrate that at the table. So those are, I think, things that we try to really focus on so that we can broaden our lens of what success can be in our firm.
Excellent. That's great. It's interesting because it's so true that it really depends on the field. I mean, in my field, journalism, we have journalism majors, we have film majors, we have history majors, English majors, political science, math majors. It just, I think it definitely depends on the field. Very, very interesting. So, we now have some questions from some of the students. There are many of them here. And just a note to my organizers, I'm not going to go in order because I think some of them may have been already touched on. But the first one is from Amaya Johnson, who goes to Howard. And she has a very interesting question about the future of remote jobs. Hey, Amaya, how are you? Do you want me to ask it or do you want to ask it? I'll ask it and then I'll just, look for you to chime in. So Amaya is asking, as automation shifts the workforce towards more remote jobs, how are your companies preparing for this economic shift that will happen over the next, 2 decades or so? How would you recommend students prepare for this change in the workforce? And Leah, why don't you go first?
Gosh darn it, I was hoping Cindy, then I was just gonna cut and paste what she said. Thanks, Alvin. I think one, watching my company where we already sort of had a foundation of remote workers around, but not as many. Having pivoted, and we had all the means. We had VPN, we had access to be able to pivot quickly because our software allowed that. We were already a step ahead. So, but the piece that we had to shift was the mind shift of many. Many people were used to having to be in the office, or how do I build team dynamics, or how do I bring my team together remotely, or how do I lead my team remotely? Because we had a few people here and here that were remote, not the majority. Now that it's the majority, we really are mindful about, okay, how am I pulling people together on this screen time? Is that necessarily a meeting? Do we need to do that? Can we, send stuff out ahead of time and then we just meet and talk about XYZ? Can we record this and put this up for other people to watch later and then we'll get together and discuss? So I think we've been really readjusting to how we work remotely and what's been the most effective. But the big thing that I found with my team, I have a team of 30, they just work nonstop. Like it's so hard to cut it off when you're in your house, right? You can literally roll out of your bed and go straight to your computer, and the next thing is 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. So we've put things in place like wellness days where no one is allowed to work. You're off the screen. We put those in on, and then we do no meetings Friday. I do my one-on-ones with some of my directs where I'm like, okay, get on your phone. We're going to take a walk while we're doing our one-on-one. So we're not just sitting in front of a screen. So just really trying to find ways to mix it up to one, keep the connections, but also not keep people here all of the time, I think is important. And I think for the students coming in, my son did a summer internship and he was in front of the computer the whole time. So I think for me, I was like, okay, you need the right lighting. We need to get you a bigger screen, getting all of the tools to be successful. And I would be like, you have your sneakers in back of you in the view. Like, that's not professional. You got to make sure it's a professional setting. So I would ensure, like, if you don't, that's the beauty of virtual backgrounds. Pull up a virtual background, then invest in a good green screen if you're not going to clean up your room behind you. Those are some of the things that just come top of mind for me. I'm sure Cindy has a lot more.
That is so great. And yes, virtual backgrounds, definitely super helpful. I think, a couple of things. I've had the benefit of actually working for remote first companies and very distributed global workforce teams. And so I think what Leah mentioned about sort of that mindset shift is very real, in that people really need to understand how managing people in a remote environment is really different from managing people in an in-person environment. And it's very similar to having to manage, really widely distributed teams. Like, you have to be cognizant of things like different time zones. You have to be cognizant of how you make sure all the voices are heard in every meeting. And, you have to be intentional about building in time to get to know people as opposed to just focusing in on tasks. And that also applies to like people who have to manage, right? How am I going to manage people who I don't see every day, right? And really shifting to managing by results as opposed to managing by the clock, right? So there's a lot of those types of shifts that have to happen. And I think along with that comes an acknowledgement of this is the new normal. I think if we believe that we're going to go back to the way things were before the pandemic, that we are mistaken. We have to figure out how to build in more of this remote environment into our everyday and really plan for that moving forward, as opposed to just planning for how we're going to return back to the office. And I think also just in terms of the other part of your question around the automation piece, right? This applies too, right? I think we have to think about how, as we are shifting more low value work to automated processes and systems, then what does that do to me as a worker, right? Like how does that free up my time to really think higher level about strategy, about how we collaborate, how we can like drive new product ideas and business development things, right? Like we're going to be able to shift much more into that knowledge economy that we're already in, and it will be like exponential, I think, in the future. And so the more that we can hone, like you as students, the more that you can hone, the new ideas and that strategic perspective and really, taking the initiative on things. I think that those are skill sets that will really serve you well in this new world.
Completely agree, Sonia. I think that's such a huge piece. That's a whole separate conversation of different job sets and up leveling your skill to a different level now. And how do we reskill a workforce development group that's, are losing so many of their jobs to automation, but now we have a demand for a different set of skills. And how do we provide that training so that folks can have that and students come in? That's why I was like, I tell people coding is great and it's a great skill to learn, but I really believe it's going to be automated out at one point. We're going to have computers building their own code if we already don't already.
Amaya, all good? Answered your question?
Yes, thank you guys so much for your help and your advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, for your question. All right, next up is Hannah Zhu. Hannah has, I'll wait for Hannah to pop up. Hi, Hannah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Right, Zhu? I hope so.
Oh, it's Shu.
Shu, got it. So Hannah has a question about making connections in your first job search. So she wants to know whether you have any advice on structuring your sort of full-time job search and how one would go about it. Cindy, you want to take that one first?
I'm going to go back to something that Leah said earlier, which is know yourself, right? Start with you, right? So make sure that you understand what your strengths are, what your motivations are, and where the types of companies that you want to work for, right? I think you should be clear about also sort of the type of culture at a company that you want to work for, like how does it align to your values, right? And so, structuring your job search really starts with understanding yourself and what your interests are and where you want to go. And then once you figured that out, right, like put together a short list of those companies that fit your criteria, right? And start to really research those, and then look at like who in your networks or who are the people that you need to figure out how to get to learn more about those companies, right? So this is the whole human connection networking piece that we're talking about today, and do the work to really figure out like how making those connections and looking at the opportunities that are available to you to get as close to that as possible, and then go from there. Do the informational interviews, right? Do the reach outs, attend the events, right? Do all the research that we've talked about today to really get your job search in gear.
Definitely, +1 to everything Cindy said. And I think you said something that was really important, Hannah, was like your first job, making your first job search a job that you have to dedicate time to it. It's not a side gig, like really putting in the time and initiative into looking for that job, because you're only going to get back from that job search what you put in. So to Cindy's point is one, understanding yourself, at least in that moment. We know that we are constantly dynamic beings. We change, we grow, we evolve. So where are we going to be 20 years from now? I stop asking people, well, where do you want to be 10 years from now? I say to the folks that I mentor, what experiences are you trying to have in the next 2 to 3 years? Do you want to travel? Do you want to get financial skill sets? Do you want to work in, deep technology? Do you want to, what are the experiences that you want to have in the industry? Start there and then start moving into okay, so I want to travel. I want to do a lot of traveling with my job. Okay, so let's look at the gigs that travel that have your skill sets. And it helps to narrow it down, because I know it can be so overwhelming to think, what do I want to be? That seems so finite. Like I need to get somewhere and be that thing, right? And we're not one thing. We're always growing and evolving and developing. So it's like, okay, what are the experiences that I want to have over the next couple of years? And then everything that Cindy said, right? Do the research in there, do the informational interviews, go out and go to the event. And I really feel like when you know you're in the right spot, there is a gut feeling that you'll have like, this is so right. Like, this is where I need to be. Think about when you did your college search, like that same thing, when you finally decided what school you were going to land on. What were like, how did you know that was the right place to be? Some of those same things, it's just a different landscape, but it's the same tool set that you're using to make those decisions. So I think one, Cindy hit on it from the beginning, understanding yourself and knowing the work environments that you thrive in. How do you work? Just like in school, you figure out the best ways that you learn, so that okay, I learn better writing notes, or I learn better typing my notes, or I learn better visually. You understand the best way you take information. You've got to figure out, what are the best cultural environments that I work in? What are the best teams? I don't like teams where everybody's super extroverted. And so what is that kind of culture that I need to work in that helps me thrive? And then once you do that, you have a better understanding, and it's not as overwhelming when you're looking at the many opportunities that will come to you.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll add to what Leah just said is that, very often people, you may not know what you want to do, right? And so you take lots of people will take the approach of, I'll just apply to everything. Like there's like 5 different, there's 100 different job openings. I'm going to apply to 20 of them at the same company. That actually works against you most of the time. I think the more that you can actually focus in and be able to articulate what you bring to the table in a job, and why you'd be a really good fit for this role, you're more likely to get the connection and get your resume looked at than somebody who doesn't or can't articulate that in the same way. So I highly recommend being more focused and being really clear about what it is that you are bringing in terms of your skill sets and what you can offer to the company.
All right, Hannah, does that work for you? Good stuff there. Thanks so much for your question. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for answering. It was great. I learned a lot.
Thanks. All right, next question is from Christopher Robinson. And is Christopher there? Hey, Christopher, actually,
yes.
I've been remiss. I should have let the first 2 students ask their own question. So I'm going to do that now with you. I know you want to ask a question about changing careers and mentorship. So please ask your question of Leah and Cindy.
Okay, I guess, so in my situation, I studied pre-med, and then I did work in the entertainment industry. So now I'm studying quantitative finance at Fordham. I'm doing a master's. It's like big gaps, big different things. But basically in all different roles, I did like different types of coding and analytical things. But But I guess like my question is, how would you say, what makes a person the most competitive to you when you see this career change or whatever, as opposed to looking at an application from someone else who might have just had this major already and did this stuff and studied that? Like, how can you be more competitive? And also, my second question was the mentorship. Like, how do you build that? You guys kind of like spoke on it already, but like, I feel like you make relationships with people, you communicate with them, you talk with them, right? But how do you bridge that gap of just being more of a friendship and we just talk here and there to saying like, hey, can I get some more advice? I would like you to be my mentor. Like, like, can we get more like serious, like, more discussions than just talking about sports and things here and there, even though you're in a position that I would like to be in and you're a great person,
So, well, look, Leah and Cindy both have done sort of a zigzag in their career, so I'm pretty sure they can handle this one about career changes. So, Leah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, for career changers, and if I'm understanding the question is, how would we look at a career changer, somebody who's had different experiences from different industries versus somebody who just sort of came out of school and has a degree in that area, doesn't have that same path? Is that what I'm?
Yeah, like how, like to make that person compete with that person that has just did this all the time.
Okay, so I think it's all in how you sell your story, right? You've got to share a compelling story. Like you can say, I've had experience in X, Y, Z. I bring a breadth of experience. And across this experience, these have been the patterns that I have seen that apply to your whatever the case is in whatever job. So it's you stitching together the story. Tell me the story. You tell me how it works in your benefit. How does it best serve you in this particular role that you're interviewing for? I mean, and there's great ways to spin that, right? I've worked in this industry and I worked in this industry and I worked in this industry. And the one thing that I've seen that works across all of them is building systems that, have processes set in place and are built at scale. Like when those things were missed, doesn't matter the industry, that's when problems came about. So being able to tie those experiences together and what you've learned out of it. And I think one of the things that Cindy mentioned earlier when we were talking about looking at candidates, I think another piece that you can add to that too is if you can come to me in an interview and be like, hey, I've studied your company, I've seen this, and I noticed this gap. I've noticed this problem. And with that, here's some suggested solutions. Like that would be like, wow. Now, whether I think that's a problem or whether I think it's a solution, that's beyond the point. The point is you did some thought, you took the initiative, you did some gap analysis work and a suggestion, which tells me you're a critical thinker. You're looking at things across the board. So I think it's all in how you present the story.
And
Yeah.
thank you, Leah. And we are running out of time. And Cindy, if you could give a quick answer, then I think we're gonna have to wrap it up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it comes down to just you answering the question of how can you help me as an employer, right? Everything that Leah said is really boils down to like, what's in it for me as an employer to hire you? Like why? What you bring to the table, how you're going to help me solve this problem, this issue, make my product better, etc. So answer that, and that will make you stand out.
Excellent. Christopher, thanks so
Thank you.
much for the question. We appreciate it. Thanks for your engagement as well. All righty. Well, thank you all so much for joining this Bridges webinar today. Leah McGowen-Hare and Cindy Owyoung, we really appreciate it. You gave a lot of great advice, as the kids say, dropped a whole lot of knowledge. We appreciate it. And I'm told that that I should remind everyone to register for the next one next Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern. But thanks so much. And everybody, please have a great day.